Hello, this is Dale Matthews. I'm joined by a cannabis leaf and Mike Jones.
Hey, Dale, what's going on?
Well, we listened to the county commissioners on KJO this morning, and they had a lot to say, mostly about marijuana. Really? Right. They're just talking about marijuana all the time. Cheryl doesn't want to talk about hemp, and I think Simon doesn't either. But we're going to let them have their say, and then we'll come back in and we'll say a few cogent things if we have anything cogent to say. Go ahead, Mike, play that video, that audio.
Salem, we understand, and may call in, and if he does, we'll... Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday Talk Show. We have, let's see, it's been a while since we've been in here, about 5 weeks. We had a long month with extra Tuesdays stuck in there, so we've not been able to talk with our county commissioners for about 5 weeks. It's been that long, and we have two in studio. Simon here is... attending a meeting in Salem, we understand, and may call in, and if he does, we'll try to make him part of the conversation this morning. But in the meantime, say good morning to Chairman Keith Heck, Vice Chair Cheryl Walker. Good morning. Welcome. Glad to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Anything in particular on your minds this morning, Chairman Heck?
Heat.
Yeah, we're nice and cool inside, folks.
Yeah. It's just the idea of making sure that everybody is very aware of caution, because it just takes one spark, and then half the hillside's on fire. And so that's, especially as we're coming up to the 4th of July and all the fireworks funds and all that other kind of thing. Might the satisfaction be found at the Josephine County Fairgrounds with a special fireworks presentation? But if you are going to exercise that freedom, exercise it responsibly this year for sure, because it's a tinderbox and it's only going to get worse as the weather continues and warms up. So just be wise.
There are specific rules within the city limits of Grants Pass. Those are posted on our website about times and places where you can use your own fireworks, and we encourage, once again, safety. And most of all, we're talking triple digits here for several days. Right. Check on your neighbors, take care of your pets, make sure everything is hydrated, stay cool if you possibly can.
Yes, one thing I'd like to mention too is particularly your pets. It's very common for people to take their dogs or whatever with them in the car, and then they get somewhere and they go, I can't take them in, it'll only be a few minutes. But within that few minutes, it can get to 120, 130 or even higher in that car, and it can and make the animal suffer. And I just saw coming in here today a pickup truck going down the road, and they had a wooden box in the back with dogs in the wooden box. I mean, that's just like an oven. So even if you think it's tolerable at 80 or 85 degrees, it's not tolerable for your animals. So please be careful with those animals.
All right, everybody just take care of everybody here for the next, for this heat wave, certainly. And by all means, it's a good habit to get into all the time. Check on your neighbors, all those things. Very, very important. Oh, now, business-wise, you two have a very busy agenda tomorrow at the business session.
Yes, we do have a busy one. I know that today we're talking about the Measure 91 Task Force legislation that's coming down as House Bill 3400. And so that will probably be appearing on future agendas, but I know I've had some phone calls about it that has to do with the implementation of Measure 91 recreational marijuana, which the bill was supposed to go into effect actually tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But there have been some changes in that as to how it's going to be implemented. So if people are interested or engaged in that, they need to be sure that they watch the House Bill 3400 as for those changes. But with the county, as the board, we had a little discussion, brief discussion, I believe it was recently, that we wanted to put it on the agenda this week to talk about the facts of it and what might be in the bill for the county. Certain things that the legislature has actually put in there. We can regulate the time and the manner of the sale. So that is going to be something that we need to look at, and I think that we may put together a community group to help work on that.
Oh, all right. Now, the city is also contemplating some things. Is there any conversation between the city and the county right now about recreational marijuana?
I've not had that discussion.
No. And that's part of the problem, too, with this whole thing. Everybody has, not everybody, but a lot of folks have the idea that tomorrow, July 1, freedom rings as far as marijuana usage goes. That's not so. There are still restrictions. There are still laws that apply to that. There are numbers of plants that one can grow. You have to have certain footage from certain businesses, schools, and all those kinds of things. So just because July 1st appears does not mean we can go off and light up and walk down 6th Street. You can't do it in public. And that's those laws, those have to be known and reminded personally as well as societally, that this is not just a free fire zone now, because okay, we can now smoke pot anywhere we want to. No, you can't. There are still laws that apply. There are still cities. Cave Junction is, I don't know for sure, but I think they have banned it as far as use in the city goes. If you are a federal employee or related to a federal employee in the sense of working in a county facility, and you are a federally supported individual, that's still against the law to use marijuana. And that's one of the difficulties, because the parole and probation department in Josephine County, you cannot have marijuana in your system and be in compliance with the parole and probation requirements.
Well, no, I believe private employers have that same right.
Yes.
In every job classification, you have it in your system, you're subject to dismissal.
Right. And I know that just this week the county issued an affirmation of our county policy in that regard, that there is still a zero tolerance. We still do drug testing when we hire. We will still do drug testing if there is suspicion. We will do drug testing randomly in certain occupations, if you're operating equipment, that kind of thing. So our drug policy is not changed in the county.
Well, now, you've had a preview look at what's coming down the pike here, have you not?
On House Bill 3400?
Yes.
Yes, I obtained a copy of it on Friday, and I don't know if Commissioner Heck has, but it's about 150 to 200 pages long, so I was going through picking out the things that the county might have some jurisdiction, and there's, like I said, the time and manner and the delivery of it. Yes, we can do that. For instance, we can determine that you can only have an establishment that sells marijuana, the recreational marijuana. You can only be open 8 to 6, or you can only be open 6 days a week. Those are the kinds of things that we have to look at, because that's the authority the state has given us.
What about location?
Yes, location. We can also do that, and that's going to open up the whole area of zoning. And we can determine what zones, or if any, or if it's just going to be anywhere we designate. I have had a discussion with legal counsel in regards to some of those locations. For instance, the state has determined that it's an agricultural crop, and so should it be limited to exclusive farm and forest, as is in the bill? And then there's also the retail outlets. Should they be limited to, of course we talk about rural because we don't have jurisdiction in the city, but would they need to be limited to rural commercial or industrial? So those are all questions that are going to have to be answered, and those are the ones that the state has given us to wrestle with.
All right. What kind of window do you have to wrestle with this before we can start lighting up and walking down the street to use?
State law does not allow you to use it out in a public arena as far as walking down the street. If you're growing, you have to have it protected from vision from outside. So that's the reason there's been a great growth in fences, cedar fences around the area. And that's just part of that does not have anything to do with the county rules or regulations. Those are state rules and regulations that do apply. The difficulty is going to come in how is it enforced. I mean, I don't believe in the fundamental goodness of man. And if there's a loophole that I can jump through, there will be a very busy highway jumping through those loopholes. And those are the difficulties that the citizenry face in Josephine County as well as every other county. There is no 10 steps of how you implement these rules. Even yet, there are not. There are many, many unknowns. And in one sense, we like to have the local ability to control some of these things, and we don't like the state mandating what we are going to do and have to do locally.
Well, you know what? I think that the one thing that we have learned so far is that Keith Heck does not believe in the fundamental goodness of man, and but the rest of this stuff we need to consult an expert about. and we have with us Peter Gendron, and I'm wondering if anything that you have heard so far, does any of the things that they're discussing not jive with your understanding?
Good afternoon, gentlemen, or good evening for your audience. This is Peter Gendron en route to Salem and then Portland for further discussion of the implementation of Measure 91 with the state legislature, and then a meeting for the Licensing, Compliance, and Enforcement Committee of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission immediately after that. We will be addressing some of those concerns that Commissioners Walker and Heck expressed, such as time, place, and manner, and there will be certain decisions that are allowed by the counties themselves to make. However, many of the things that still appear to be in question will be decided by administrative rule prior to the beginning of recreational sales. And I'm terribly sorry that Commissioner Heck doesn't believe in the fundamental goodness of man, because I thought that was one of the tenets of our civil society. But that's probably another day's conversation.
Well, also, Peter, one of the things that's kind of strange about that is, didn't this guy used to be in charge of the Gospel Rescue Mission?
That's
okay,
my understanding.
Two other things about their initial statement here. One of them was that Cheryl Walker said, well, we wanted to bring this before the public. No, they didn't want to bring this before the public. As a matter of fact, they weren't going to talk about it in public at all. And it wasn't until they were outed on Wednesday by us that they just, oh, well, maybe we should be talking about this in a public meeting, which they did today, but they had no plans to do so about this before. And they talked just today about the kinds of people that should be on this marijuana task force. And the other part was Cheryl Walker said, well, we've had no discussions with the city at all about their marijuana laws and our marijuana. This is going to come as a big surprise to Simon Hare, who says, yes, they've been having discussions with the city. So their adherence to the facts, just from the things that we know, is not very close. What are you hearing? Are they about right about the other things there, Peter?
Yes, by and large, there are a couple of sources that you can use for simple information. One of them is the website set up by the state called What's Up Oregon. And it has basically the 9 points of adherence that are going to govern most behavior under this law. I would like to take a second also to agree with the Commissioner's opening statements. When you're putting out your pipe, ladies and gentlemen, be very careful, because you wouldn't want your grass fire to start a grass fire.
Yes.
Funny. That's Peter Gendron's version of a joke.
Yeah, well, listen, he's got a good sense of humor there.
He's a pretty serious guy, but that was not bad, Peter. Go ahead.
And then there was a couple of other websites that you had mentioned when we were discussing before the program. Marijuana.oregon.gov, is that correct?
Yes, that is the place for citizens to put in their input to the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, and also to keep up with the meetings that are being held by the committees on implementing Measure 91. You'll find all of the audio available there, and helpful links as to the current status of the legislation and rulemaking process as well.
And then there's one other website that what'slegaloregon.com.
What's Legal Oregon, yes.
Yeah, What's Legal Oregon. Now, I have a question. Because it seems that the medical marijuana and recreational marijuana are being handled by two different regulatory agencies, is it a possibility that they're going to start selling recreational marijuana at the state-sponsored liquor stores? So there's two of them there in Grants Pass that I know of, and call that a day in terms of the recreational sales of it, or is there talk of licensing to privately owned establishments?
Under the current set of proposals, which we believe will be enacted for retail sales beginning October 1st of this year, the state legislature is governing the advancement of that program. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission will ultimately be in charge of the retail facilities that are providing cannabis products to the consuming public at large. However, those stores will not be located in liquor stores. There will not be any commingling of sales of cannabis products at stores like 7-Eleven or at bars either.
Mm.
Well, one of the things that we see when we go down to the grocery store is you can get chocolate in various percentages, 10%, 20%, 30%, 700%, I assume. Now, what about the potency? And we know that the OLCC, Oregon Liquor Control Commission, does have something to do with at least assuring that the liquor that you're buying is of a certain potency, high or low. Who's going to be doing the regulation of the potency and, say, the THC content of recreational marijuana?
For recreational marijuana, it will look very similar to our current medical program, and in fact, we anticipate the medical program to actually be improved by the implementation of formal regulation for recreational sales. The labs that are established in Oregon right now also are participating in the OLCC process to write these administrative rules, and the material as it is coming from the recreational growers before it goes to the stores will be passed through labs for testing for potency, chemical constituents, primarily THC and CBD, and will also be tested to make sure that it is free of pesticide, mold, and mildew regulation. As it currently exists, the standards for both recreational and medicinal marijuana products will be more stringent than for any other comparable product on the market.
Well, now, what about?
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
the delay
Mike.
there. Okay. Will it be equal regulation on the derivative products? Because there's going to be, there's the marijuana itself. If you just want to go in and buy yourself a bag of weed, and then you're talking about consumables. Things of that nature, and how are they going to regulate what's in that?
Both the precursor materials will be tested as well as the finished products. So you'll see a system of testing where a grower-producer will provide material into a lab, be verified, make sure that it's free of pesticides, mold, and mildew, and establish what the chemical content is. And then at that point, it would go with the lab test results and numbers attached to it to a facility which is producing it into a secondary product, whether it be a food product or oil that can be used in a vape pen. After that is finished being produced, it would then go back to the lab, be retested, and the second test of numbers would be attached to that product for its distribution at a retail point of sale, so that every product that is coming out of these facilities will have the date and batch number on the product itself to verify it from the end user all the way back to the original producer for purity and potency.
Well, what about something like consumer testing? I think we all know somebody that would like to be on a consumer test panel to try out those brownies or to smoke that thing and to give you their independent reaction to its potency.
Currently, we don't have a system set up like that, Dale. However, if you would like to provide input on a system like that, you can do so through the website marijuana.oregon.gov, and I'm sure they'd be happy to take your input.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and Dale, you know what I've seen, behind almost every product, there's some advocate on YouTube that goes and tests every little thing and does a review video, and as a result of that, gets free products. So there'll be a line from here to the state line for that job, I'm sure.
Now, how soon, Peter, would you guess before we see Liggett and Myers jump in here and have, the Winston-Salem version of this, or maybe even Monsanto, the Monsanto brand of not hemp, but marijuana?
I don't believe that Monsanto is going to be getting involved in it at any point soon. As to larger corporations and their general interest in this particular industry, the cannabis business, I see that their participation may be inevitable at some point in the future. However, the current nature of federal Schedule 1 and the nature of the small businesses that this has grown up around, over the last 17 years at least, since Measure 67 made medical consumption legal. These are small family farms. These are sun-grown growers. They're very independent people, and they're not likely to embrace corporate participation immediately.
It's funny that
Makes
this
sense.
is a thing that's grown often in someone's backyard or in some rural setting, and you're used to, driving through various areas and sweet cron available here, and you pull over and there's a little lean-to kind of thing where you can buy some corn or some tomatoes or whatever. That's not going to happen in this case, though, is it?
At this point, it doesn't look like the rulemaking process in the first few years of the program would allow for roadside or stand sales like you're describing.
Right. Now, there's been a lot of talk among the cannabis advocates about the benefits behind growing it with free sunshine from outside versus a hothouse kind of approach, or growing it inside your apartment. Is there really a discernible difference between the products that are grown? Remember, this is legal starting, parts of it are legal starting tomorrow. So are there any discernible benefits and things that are grown under the God's bright sunshine?
This is an area where, once again, thanks to federal Schedule 1 status for this plant, it hasn't been tested as thoroughly as it should be. So can I make a definitive claim that sun-grown is superior? No. But I would say that there's a substantial body of anecdotal evidence and a number of studies done over the last 2 decades that indicate that it may very well be superior in several aspects. The first would be obviously the efficiency of production. Cannabis is actually a crop that consumes substantially more CO2 than it puts out and has very few comparisons in the plant kingdom. So being able to grow sun-grown is actually a carbon benefit. The plant isn't carbon neutral, it's carbon negative. I think we should be getting carbon tax credits, but that's probably a different conversation.
There you go. Fighting global warming with, some variety of kush or
a
something.
Different kind of sequestration.
Yep. Plant some kush for global warming mitigation, absolutely. The second point here, though, that I think there is discussion, is that there are these chemical compounds called terpenes. Now, most people haven't heard the word terpene, but you'd know what they are. If I say pepper, you have a smell in your mind immediately. That smell is derived from a terpene. Same thing if I say pine or if I say lemon. Those terpenes would be referred to as pinene and limonene. The marijuana plant is the only plant that has been studied that has every terpene known to man in it in varying ratios. That's part of the reason that 2,000 different varieties of cannabis have 2,000 different tastes and smells. Some of these terpenes have already been studied from the plants that they're prevalent in and been proven to have medicinal benefit. Because sun-grown cannabis happens outdoors with the full spectrum of radiation, not just the light that we can see, but every other band. There's been some research done that indicates that the terpene profiles are fuller and more complete in sun-grown cannabis versus cannabis grown indoors under artificial lighting.
So
there's a lot of science
only on our show are you going to hear the statement that it's every terpene ratio known to man. Really? I mean, just think, where else in life are you going to hear such a thing? Mike, why don't we hear just a little bit more from the commissioners? Let them blather on, make their cogent statements a little bit more, okay?
Okay.
Well, this is also part of that fundamental struggle, because we are going to have to come up with some rules, policies. What do we want to do? How far do we want it from various businesses or whatever? When do we want it to be able to be sold? These are locally allowed determinations to make at this time. Next year might be totally different, but at this time, we have that responsibility.
I believe there is a deadline in the bill, and I don't recall what that deadline is, that we would have to have this in place, and I believe it's sometime in 2016, but I'm not positive about that. Like I said, it was very long, and I didn't get a chance to read all of it thoroughly, but I think there is a limitation
Right. Generally, what I'm understanding without having a lot of specific information at my hand is that although technically at midnight tonight it becomes legal, we're probably almost a year away from getting everything sorted out.
Yes, probably. And I do remember that they're going to allow the retail sale of recreational marijuana through the medical marijuana dispensaries beginning October 1st. But they will not be able to tax it until, I believe, January 1st. So I don't know what all factors go into that, but you're correct. It's probably going to be some time before there's full implementation. So anyone involved in the use or the business of marijuana is going to have to pay very close attention to what actually comes out of the state in the next few weeks.
All right. What was that phrase? Know before you grow.
This flyer that the county has made available is educate before you recreate. And it's 9 simple little steps, and it's very good. 21, you have to be over 21 to be able to possess and or use recreational marijuana. Well, I'm 18. That's fine. I'm glad. You need another 3 years before you can legally possess it and or grow it. You can use recreational marijuana at home or on private property. Public use is still illegal. So there's a good little sheet that we have. I think it's on our website, but it is on the walls, and you'll see it appearing in different places around as well.
If we wanted to pick one up physically, can we come to your office and get it?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Tuesday Talk Show here. We're just conversing here for the first 30 minutes. We'll take your phone calls after the news at the top of the hour. That'll be 472-1270 is the number to call. In the meantime, please stay tuned. We've got more to come right after this important message.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Good enough for that. Just before we go back to Peter for comments about what they just said, true or false, etc., did you notice that they're not talking about any kind of promotion of something that's going to mean dollars for put into everyone's pockets? They're talking about regulating, imposing rules on top of it, and making sure that we pull this thing in and we decide what's legal or not legal. Cheryl is the head of economic development. Where is any talk about saying, oh, wow, let's attract people here to do this big industry. Let's look at the economic viability of it. No, it's all about taxing and controlling. Are you surprised by that, anybody?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it seems to me that well, I mean, they've made it pretty clear that they're not in favor of recreational marijuana at all. In fact, if you examined their heart of hearts, you'd probably find out they're not in favor of medical marijuana either. However, it's here. But I wouldn't expect them to embrace this until they start seeing some money roll in from the state, which I guess is going to impose a sales tax. They're talking about 20% right now, and that breaks down as 17% going to the state, and then an optional 3% depending on what the county wants to do. That would stay here. I
Peter,
personally would be a little.
Okay, sorry, Peter, are we on the right track on all this?
You are indeed. The state tax would be 17% under the current language in the House right now, and we expect that language to be passed into law. It's a slight departure from Measure 91 in that originally the bill had contemplated a tax at the production level. However, a couple of things complicate that. Number one, the number of producers that you would need to regulate and tax and monitor, we're going back to Mr. Heck's lack of faith in humanity here, versus the number of retail facilities that you have to tax, regulate, and monitor. It's much easier to regulate on the retail end of taxation. The second thing is that the number of products that are going to be made that are not whole flower are going to require a different tax structure, and it's more difficult to establish what you get out of those processes once you put in the source material, because it is a natural product. There's a variation in source material. So it makes it less complicated to tax all of the other products when it's taxed at the retail end as well.
Now, so you're saying that there would be, say, buds, which would be taxed at probably likely 20%, and then some of the other products that come out of it would be taxed at the same amount or a lesser amount?
The idea is to have everything taxed at 20%, but with a concentrate like an oil or a secondary product like a brownie, those are the two that people refer to most often, so I use them as examples. The amount of material that you put into it for the amount you get out of it can vary. So it's more accurate to put that tax on the consumption end where the consumer is purchasing it from a retail facility. You get a more accurate tax value. Overall, the difference between the taxes that Measure 91 contemplated and what we are currently enacting are essentially the same. There is not going to be a loss of revenue to the state from transferring it, and in fact, there may be an additional benefit by reducing the cost of enforcement and compliance. I would also add here that the 3% that's reserved for municipalities as a local option tax, they can only pass and take advantage of that tax if they allow dispensaries and commercial growing, which currently Josephine County and Grants Pass are both contemplating doing away with. The county commissioners had their first bad run-in with the kind of publicity that can be generated with these over-restrictive laws back at the end of January. And the city, even as we speak, is contemplating passing an ordinance tomorrow night banning all outdoor cultivation, forcing an industry which we're trying to tax, regulate, and legitimize back underground. One of the accusations I heard recently was that the medical marijuana community is responsible for the black market in Oregon. And I have to take issue with that. Prohibition is responsible for the black market in Oregon. Oregon's tax structure for this plant is designed so that it will make the retail price at legitimate establishments price competitive with the unregulated market. Because that's what we're really talking about here, is we're talking about regulating a market, and then the difference is you have a regulated market where everything is tested and regulated, or you have an unregulated market where nothing is tested and verified.
Right.
Now, Mike, could you also, while Peter talks a bit longer about the city and some of the mistakes he feels they're making, could you get that clip ready with that phone caller? Do you mind doing that, bud?
Yeah, no, I'm already queued to that zone.
Go right ahead. I think Peter also had something to say about what he felt were mistakes that the Grants Pass City Council was making.
Well, and here, before you go to that, let me ask, the 20% tax, at some point you have taxed any given product high enough to where people will just resort to the black market, as opposed to going to a retail outlet there. So what do you think of this 20% level? Is this too high, or is this enough to where people will still just go buy it from a retail establishment?
Well, there would be some people that I'm sure would disagree with me on this, but there are some people that disagree with me on it being legal. So since it's going to be legal tomorrow, let's just go ahead and have this discussion, shall we? The state of Washington originally put their tax point at several different points in the production and distribution of the plant. As a result, the tax burden became too high, and Washington has had difficulties implementing its laws and making the facilities that are there productive and profitable. That is something which they're looking to Oregon on right now, and in fact, they're already reducing their tax at the retail level because they understand that the cities of Vancouver and Portland are a competitive market. And federal law aside, you can't really stop somebody who works in one city but lives in the other from going across the bridge every day. So we're trying to make it so that the tax structure is fair and is able to be competitive with the unregulated market. Can you tax it too high? Yes, definitely. Sure. But compared to the Measure 91 tax, which was absolute because it was a tax based on weight, it's actually more reasonable to do it as a percentage tax because as the price fluctuates, the amount of tax gained by the state will fluctuate along with the price, making sure that the producers know that they're not going to wind up paying half of their production cost or more in tax.
Right. And do you happen to know what they're paying in the Washington markets that you were talking about? They've adjusted from what to what?
Initially, the tax was 25% at 3 points of distribution. It's being restructured to a 37% tax at the retail end, is my current understanding. So basically cutting it in half. That's why the prices in Washington for legal retail cannabis were so high, and the prices for unregulated cannabis were still much lower, closer to conventional unregulated market prices, even through their medical facilities.
And what do you think the legality is going to do to the supplies of marijuana that's available on the black market? Do you think just because it's legal to grow, there will automatically be an increase in the supply of black market marijuana?
No, in fact, we expect a reduction, quite the opposite of that hypothesis.
Well, that'll help balance the price thing there.
There are a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that when you're faced with a prison term or a 20% tax, the 20% tax is a no-brainer.
It's a more attractive option. Yes, I could see that.
I would choose
that. The second one is that as some of the detractors on this subject have made it very clear, the nature of the legality never seems to have impeded anybody from obtaining this plant. It is, after all, an herb and rightfully should be considered as such. However, because it's more psychoactive than most herbs and it's been culturally taboo in our society for the last 78 years, we understand that until federal rescheduling is accomplished, there will still be additional restrictions placed on this plant that don't apply to other things in its class.
Well, one of the things that I've heard that the Grants Pass City Council is saying is that we're on the edge of a some kind of emergency situation. This is new. That all of the medical marijuana dispensaries and growers are going to be subject to a huge increase in crime, and the crime figures are coming after them, and we're right on the edge of chaos. That's what I understand. Perhaps the person that told me this was a bit overwrought, but how close to reality is that? What is the Grants Pass City Council saying?
That's pretty close to what they're saying. That's definitely what they've implied, and I have to object to that. Again, the experts, both in the cannabis business and in law enforcement, do not project a large increase in cultivation, or they do not project, as Attorney Bartholomew called them in yesterday's council session, drug rips, or thefts from drug owners. We see a very small increase in overall cannabis production for the first 2 years at any rate, due to people having the newfound ability to grow their own without penalty. However, despite the allegations of it being a weed and easy to grow, the type of material that you find in Oregon's medical market now is beyond the ability of most newcomers to be able to grow. Their cultivation efforts may be sufficient for their own personal needs or for their own personal enjoyment for a period of time. However, I think you'll find in the long run that purchasing through state-regulated stores will be more cost-efficient and is something that most people will do. Just because we can all grow our own tomatoes doesn't mean we do. And when it comes to cities like Grants Pass and their current proposal, and counties such as Josephine and their current ban on medical facilities and proposed ban on recreational facilities, I grow my own tomatoes in the summertime, and when I run out of my tomatoes, I buy them in a store. If they do not provide a legal venue, an outlet for people to purchase these products, then they will find another way to purchase them, as has been demonstrated for these last many decades. The availability of this hasn't really gone down, and it hasn't really gone up. We don't really see a lot of extra people that are going to become chronic users just because it's suddenly legal. Generally speaking, people that are inclined to use the plant already do, with or without permission from the medical program. And generally speaking, we expect that people that aren't currently using the just over 50% of Grants Pass city voters, for example, that voted no on 91, we don't see them starting gardens, and we don't see them starting to use this plant the way that God intended it. So they're going to leave it alone. It's not really going to change the overall numbers very much.
Okay, so one thing that most of our viewers already know, some of them may not, is the word weaponize. The idea to take sarin gas and to weaponize it means you turn it into something that could be easily transported to some subway or something and then released so that it kills a bunch of people. Not giving you any ideas. We don't have any subways here. But now we're going to hear a clip from someone who called in to talk with the commissioners that's literally talking about weaponizing hemp.
Just 1 minute timeout. Right now, the Home Depot has special buys and new lower prices.
It'll take a little bit to cue this up, I think.
And I'm calling about the marijuana laws.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Commissioner Heck already answered one question. Who's going to enforce these laws? So far, it's chaos in our area. We have a new resident here in our area who has planted a crop right next to our fence because he didn't want it under his nose. And who's going to protect the property owners that don't like this?
Excellent question, and not trying to be flippant about it, but if this is one individual's property, he has the legal rights to plant whatever he is wanting to plant that's legal on his property, and it happens to butt yours. That's not his concern in that sense.
Okay, and what comes next? Opium, cocaine. Is this in our future?
Well, that's one of the great unknowns. But you back up and you say, we as a state, we as a county, said this is an acceptable product to grow. We turned it down. The vote to legalize it was turned down in Josephine County by 2 votes out of over 35,000 votes cast. So this is a pretty well divided issue. And where you and I might think that there is this groundswell of people behind it saying no, 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 that's just not the way it works in reality, and that's the struggle.
Okay, I understand that, but I also understand that in our community it's turning into another Tacoma. These are cash crops, and that's why I'm asking, who's going to enforce these laws?
Well, we can.
These, not just since this became legal, this has been ongoing for several years.
Sure, oh sure. And this is another issue as far as the law enforcement in the counties. That's the county sheriff's job. The problem is that he doesn't have anybody to enforce it other than himself, and he's not real prone to running around looking for ways.
Okay, I have one more question, please. Being he's planted his crop next to our fence, can we plant hemp opposite?
Yeah, you step into a tough situation, and I realize. I think your phone is acting up. I think.
Yeah, I hear that.
You have to have to. Marijuana is being regulated by the state health division and by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission.
Sharon, can we just? We're going to have to put you down because we can't.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
You have another question real quickly, and we'll deal with it when we disconnect.
All right, thank you. It's just the hemp question.
Okay, thank you. There, that's better. Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am.
In answering the question, the marijuana is being governed, the medical marijuana, by the Oregon Health Division, and the recreational will be, and the growing will be governed by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission, which is interesting. And so the OLCC is the one going to be in charge of that. When it comes to hemp, that is governed by the Oregon Department of Agriculture, and it is being managed as an agriculture crop. And you have to have a permit, a license, they call it a license, to plant and grow hemp. So it's governed in a different manner and regulated in a different manner.
The lady was talking about, I believe, with the marijuana grow right next to her fence. The city of Medford has instituted a situation where they have a nuisance ordinance. City of Grants Pass is considering much the same thing. Can the county come up with a nuisance ordinance to avert smell or create a higher fence? Do you have any options?
Well, there are always the options. Now, whether the options will be accepted and enforced, that's the fly in the ointment. If we would pass an ordinance saying you can't have any marijuana within 1,000 feet of your neighbors, I mean, just use a hypothetical, how's that going to be enforced? That's one of the problems. It has to, if it is going to impinge upon somebody's fiscal situation, that is another area of requirements. This is a ball of wax that has no shape, form, and it is nothing but sticky in trying to form it and to develop it in some way that we can.
All right. Thank you very much, commissioners. We were.
All right. Well, I have a question about that. Peter, what would happen? I mean, theoretically, the other person has a crop of high quality marijuana on one side of the fence. Somebody else plants hemp directly on the other side. What's the result?
That is not going to happen for a couple of reasons. I'm glad Commissioner Walker has been catching up on her reading a little bit, because it appears that there is more that she needs to know, both about marijuana laws and hemp laws. I encourage her that I'm always available as a resource if she has questions.
Oh, that's what they're going to do.
Oregon Department of Agriculture requirements for obtaining a permit for hemp cultivation, which typically falls under the sativa and ruderalis species of the plant, means that you have to have a minimum 2.5 contiguous acres to plant with hemp in order to be a participant in their program. So unlike a medical grower that can plant 6 plants in their yard, you cannot plant 6 plants of hemp in your backyard. I think Ms. Walker was a little bit confused earlier in their comments when she referred to this being strictly an agricultural crop, because Measure 67, the medical law, which was passed in 1998 by the voters and we've been living under for the last 17 years, does not have a specifically agricultural restriction on production of medical personal use marijuana products.
Now, it's my understanding that that the hemp also does have some medicinal value, and that there's some CBD content to the hemp, or some varieties of hemp. Is that true?
Yes. The main difference in the way the state of Oregon defines hemp versus medical or recreational marijuana is that in order to be classified as a hemp plant and farmed under Ag Department rules, it must be under 0.3% THC, at which point it has been determined to be non-psychoactive. That same standard also would apply to other products made from hemp, although right now the state of Oregon's Ag Department is still in a test phase with the hemp program, and the only thing that you can do as a hemp farmer right now with your crop is study it and save it for seeds. It is not open for production use yet.
Well, one of the things, just to kind of sum up here, gentlemen, is that we did talk with the sheriff, Mike and I did, and posited a couple of scenarios with him. And what's not going to happen starting tomorrow and through the 4th of July weekend is people are not going to be driving around downtown, or they're not supposed to, with open containers of beer or scotch or whatever, or smoking a joint. They're not supposed to do that. They're both considered intoxicants, and so it is not okay to do that. So you don't need to think that that's going to be some immediate result from all that. But unless you've got another closing question, Mike, I would put it back to Peter and ask him for a short rendition of what we all need to know based on your latest trip to Salem, or what people need to know about the near future on this.
Well, for the near future, we don't really expect things to change that much. I'm sure there will be some terrific parties this week and this weekend in areas of the state which voted for legalization. I'm sure there will be much wringing of hands in areas that voted against legalization. But the fact of the matter here is that this law really doesn't change anything. It allows people to be more honest, if anything else. And honestly, when I was listening to Keith Heck talk about that sticky ball of wax, I thought maybe he'd been into a medical facility recently and had been playing with some of the products.
Yes.
And you said you weren't going to criticize commissioners. Oh, now, Peter. Isn't he
stranger things
hilarious
have
guy?
happened.
That's not criticism. I'm just making an observation. He did a pretty good job of describing what wax would look like and feel like.
Yes, well, we're not going to criticize anybody either. So thank you very much for joining us, Peter. You sure know your stuff. We appreciate the fact that you made yourself available and pulled over to the side of the road to safely talk to us. And so off you go to Salem to try to set them straight. We'll try to do what we can here. Mike, I think it was a good show. What do you think, bud?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it was very informative, if nothing else.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And in closing, I would just like to remind the citizens of Grants Pass that Wednesday night, July 1st at 6 o'clock in the council chambers, 101 Northwest A Street, they will be having the first public reading of this ordinance. And as it stands currently, they intend to pass it. If you're one of the 500 and some odd growers that have grown under Measure 91 for the last 17 years now, or some of the 15,000 citizens of Grants Pass that voted in favor of Measure 91, tomorrow is your last opportunity to let the City Council know what you think about banning growing and possession in greenhouses and outdoors in the city limits.